Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Shift Happens. My name is Joe Smith. I am your host and the lead pastor of an open and affirming church here in Gainesville, Florida. And with me today, I have somebody that I met through the podcast. Amanda Holder has been listening, and she's over in another part of Florida, close to where we're at. And she had reached out about, just an episode and started talking, and we started messaging back and forth. And she said, I feel like I'd like to share my part of the story. And so I was super psyched. I love it when people who listen jump on. So, Amanda, thank
Mhm.
you for taking the time to come on and share.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. And truth be told, we have played tag with this episode multiple times, sickness and kids and all this stuff. So
Mm,
I appreciate you being flexible and you know, getting this done.
yeah, of course, no problem. I'm just excited to be here.
So Amanda, why don't you tell us about your upbringing? Everybody that comes on here, that's kind of the first question is like, what did that look like for you? Was church involved then, and what did that look like? And let's just start there.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Well, stop me anytime, but I'll just start from kind of the beginning because I've listened to your podcast a lot, and I feel like my story resonates with so many of the other stories that honestly, I actually have pretty fond memories of like my childhood and my time in church. I grew up in a Baptist church, a pretty Southern Baptist church, and the majority of the people in my church were my family. I lived close, so it was just a very close knit community. And to be honest, we didn't grow up talking a lot about sexuality or anything like that. So it wasn't something super prominent, but it was definitely, we grew up under the Southern Baptist rules and the
Hmm.
fundamentals of that kind of goes along with that. But um, I am just a cisgendered white girl, that comes from a middle class family. And so, to be honest, I never questioned really any of that. But when I was a teenager, my parents got a divorce and I moved to Texas with my mom. And that was probably the first falling out kind of with the church. I felt like I left the whole church, which was, a big part of my family and all of that. And I just kind of felt very disconnected. And kind of, even though I was the one who left, I guess I kind of felt a little bit abandoned, maybe like
Hmm.
nobody kind of followed up and checked in because it was just a transition and things like that. But quickly after I joined the military, um, and I spent 13 years total in the Army Reserves. And about two of those years kind of face to face with Afghan citizens. And that was really when I had to start to kind of dive deep into what um, I was taught. It was the first time that, like, I guess I butted heads with what I grew up believing. I think I had like an internal fear of people who believed anything other than I believed. And, um, but when I was there, when I was in Afghanistan, um, I just realized that we were all so much more alike than we were different. And my interpreters were all Muslim, and we talked about God. And when things got really rough, they prayed, and like their prayers felt like super healing to me.
Hmm.
And it's like, wow, who are we praying to if you know what I mean? Like it was the first time I'm like, if their prayers are healing and I feel like this genuine, like love through them, like what makes us so different? And so,
Well,
I
can
was
I ask
really
you?
young.
Yeah, can I ask you a question real
Yeah,
fast?
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't want to stop you, but I'm curious with the teaching that you grew up with, because you were talking about that was one of the first times you really butted heads with what you believed growing up. And I'm just asking because I'm curious, was there like a Christian nationalist bent to like God and country, kind of vibe to the churches you grew up in? You know, Mine were like we had an American flag and the Christian flag, and to be a
Yeah.
good Christian meant to be a good citizen. And so I was just curious if that was part of what you brought into it with you, and then all of a sudden you meet these brown-skinned Middle Eastern people that worship a different God, and how that could really clash
Yeah.
with those belief systems.
Well, yeah, so I didn't really know a lot about Christian nationalism. I've learned a lot about that
Yep.
through, the podcast, through deconstruction and things like that. But I remember, there were definitely things that I can remember in small doses. I didn't pay attention to politics at all in general until, I mean, gosh, I spent 13 years in the army and I still really wasn't paying attention to politics. It wasn't really until I started deconstructing
Yeah.
really that I really started to like um, question things. And so, but looking back, I can remember like the church having like meetings sometimes, like when big elections where they would come together and they would discuss like what's on the ballot and things like that. And I can just imagine,
Mm.
like the influence now based on the way they've handled other situations, but I can't say for sure
Hmm.
but yeah, it definitely, like my dad is, and that whole side of the family is very like pro military and pro, on that side of it. But it's like hard to have conversations about this side of it too. Like, well, this is my real experience with it, and it's kind of hard to have those kinds of
Hmm.
conversations still.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure. And it's hard anyway, just from a, you know, I mean, I didn't serve in the military. We were talking before, my dad did, but it's hard to untangle that anyway, from
uh,
like how Americanized our churches have become, and it's hard to do that
yeah,
anyway. Um, and it's hard to do that without feeling like um, betraying or letting down people
yeah.
that you love and know. And then throw in actual real lived experience with all of that, and still trying to balance all of those things. And I'm sure that is very difficult.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's confusing. I say
Yeah.
sometimes like, I'm a mom now, so like my life revolves around a 5-year-old, and like my stresses are very different, which, you know, part of my journey is this big, massive wave of depression that hit me
Mm,
when I was just a mom, a stay-at-home mom living literally my dream life. My marriage was great, living in, kind of the dream house, and all of the things were lining up, and yet this wave of depression hit me. And so I'll kind of bounce back to that in a minute. But when I got back from my second deployment, the policies were changing in the military to be more inclusive and supportive of the LGBTQ plus community.
mhm.
Um, Really weird because now I feel like we're going backwards. I feel like we're kind of going backwards in time right now in Florida.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. It's
Yeah.
1950 here.
I know it's crazy. Um, but I joined when it was like don't ask, don't tell. And but by the time I was getting back from my second deployment, the policies were actually becoming really much more inclusive, especially towards the transgender community. And we were having our first of what was going to become an annual briefing, which we have a million annual briefings about, all kinds of topics, but about policy changes revolving around the transgender community and things like how we would respectfully engage in conversation and regulations around bathrooms and living quarters
Mhm.
and just things like to answer all the questions that people had. And at the end of that, a good friend of mine and a leader in our organization who I had such great respect for stood up and said that he was transgender. And, I don't know if at that moment I had ever met somebody who
Mm.
was transgender, at least not knowingly. And it was probably the most disorienting moment of my life, like kind of gut punch because, he was my friend and I cared about him, and like everything in me like would have been, it would, my friendship with him would be, oh, so that I can convert him. Oh yeah, you show him you love him so that you can
Oh
convert him, like
man.
that was like, that's like in my kind of like deep in my
Yes.
ingrained whatever, and that made me not feel like human. I mean, it was so um like sickening kind of, and I was like, that can't be right, and so I just like, and I didn't do anything. This wasn't part of my deconstruction yet. It was definitely the moment that spurred it, but I didn't see it until the depression hit. But I just chose to ignore that. It didn't feel right. I was like, I'm not going to say anything because we talked about God earlier in the day
Mm.
before I knew he was transgender. Why would that change? Like, and so I chose to just ignore that. And he became one of my really great friends. He started dating his now wife, who's at the exact same time I'm dating my now. I started dating my now husband, and I mean, we fostered around the same time. I mean, we just had parallel lives, and he really was, the kind of I'm think I'm going to get to share a poem that I wrote at the end, and I wrote it for him for his one of his last transitions, maybe his last transition and surgeries, and I wrote it for him for that day, and so yeah, so that's kind of like what spurred. And then when deconstruction happened and I asked God like to show me, he just really showed me with abundance, I feel like. And now I don't know what exactly I'm supposed to believe or do, but I'm just really at peace right now with where I am and with how God has called me to love people and not look at them any different than me. If I can, these people that I cared about in Afghanistan and that were Muslim, and these people that were gay or transgender that I cared about when I was willing, to die for them over in Afghanistan. Like, you don't just leave that there when you come back home. They still matter. They're not safe here in America right now, and that's ridiculous. I mean, it's just
You know,
it seems like insanity.
oh yes, I agree 100%. You said something that really struck a chord with me. It's because like we're recording this in mid-January of 24, and like our little faith community over here, our little church, we're going through this series called Reconnect, and it's about
Mm,
how do you reconnect to God and to people and to the church when we all carry so much baggage and scars from all the things that we're talking about. And um that what you just talked about when you found out your friend was transgender, and that thought process of, oh, I'm going to love them so I can convert them.
mm,
We're talking about that because that is such a dehumanizing way to see people, and just
mm,
the harm and damage that it does, not only to others, but to yourself. Like, you just are never able to, like, you're just taught to detach from your physical self. Like, the flesh is evil, right? It's sinful. And so how do you ever connect to yourself? How do you ever connect to other people if everything has an ulterior motive? It's not like like
yeah,
you said, it's not just to love somebody. It's no, no, no. The only reason I'm here, the only reason I'm allowing to myself to love you, air quotes, is because
yeah,
eventually I'm gonna invite you to church. I'm gonna sell you something.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's um, when somebody talks about it in church and you're not gay or you've never had a real close person to you, it doesn't sound that crazy. I mean, now it does. It
Hmm.
sounds really, really crazy. But I think, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's brainwashed. I don't know. But I never had to think about it really. I mean, I've always considered myself a little bit more maybe open-minded. I went to an arts high school and I had friends that were gay, but like, you know, a really close friend like that was transgender. I don't know. It was like I felt like he was placed right in my path to say, hey, this is what we're talking about right now. We're not talking about this idea that
Mm.
people put out there of what this community is. We're talking about this person who you care about, like that you genuinely, and if you care about them, wouldn't the God of the universe care about them? Like that doesn't make any sense that you could care about somebody more than the God of the universe,
Yeah,
like
I
that
do
doesn't
know.
make that's not possible.
Yeah, and I think I
And
think I think that's one of the things that we're seeing right now, though, is and I think that's probably part of the tactic is not to derail into politics, but you touched it, is how the conversation centers around topics. It centers around legislation, and it's just this
mm,
broad idea. Like you said, it's an idea versus no. I'm not going to say their name on the podcast, but I'm thinking of somebody right now that I'm really close with that's transgender, and these new laws
Mm,
have them terrified of what's going to happen
mm.
if the new slate goes through. And it's a real person who is a very productive member of our community who has an important job and
Who matters?
yeah, matters. And not that
Matters.
him and not that them mattering um is dependent on the job or the productivity or whatever. I'm just saying that um yeah, it's human
It's
beings. We're
crazy.
talking about people. Yeah. Yeah, I think
I know,
that's
and
awesome that you recognize that in the middle of all of this, and that's kind of like the moment that I think your deconstruction started. I think that's really
well, then it just like, it just kept going. It was like once I read the first book was one that you recommend for your church, The Faith After Doubt.
mm,
And that really helped. It sounds like heresy, like they say, like doubt, but it like gives you this permission. Like I
yes.
read God Breathed. I've read all of your recommendations. I'm just trying to keep up, but it's like once I started to see it that way, I was, in my mind, I'm like, gosh, this way of loving people is so healing for them and for me. And I started volunteering, with the free mom hugs. And oh my gosh, like you get out there and hug these people at the pride parades, and it's like the most healing moment in the world for me. So like, and I just hope that I can give a little bit back to them. But like, I just feel like I wish people would just go out and hug them,
Yeah.
like just to be with them, because um, it's really easy to talk about it from the sidelines, but it's when you start to actually see these people and the tears going down their faces with just a hug, like they matter and they just need love. And um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
so
was
I don't know what,
I
yeah.
no, I get it. I our first Pride festival that we attended here in Gainesville, my wife and I, we wore free Doug, mom and dad hug shirts. And I mean, it was one of those moments that you'll just never forget. It was one particular young person. They were probably late teens, maybe early 20s, and they asked for the hug, and I was like, "Of course, that's why I'm wearing this."
Hmm.
And it was a group of people, and my wife was with me. We're all standing there talking, and this person just, kind of comes up and says this, and then it wasn't a hug. It was a they were clinging to me
Mm,
and just
yeah.
bawling and and whispered "I love you" to me. And and I knew that that person wasn't talking to me, right? It was who I was supposed to be, who should
Mm,
have been there and hugging. And like that moment just, I mean, number one, as a dad, it broke my heart
yeah.
for what that person had to go through in their life to hug and tell a stranger they love them. Like, and then but it made me determined to start helping create something better, like in the middle of
Yeah.
all of this crap that we're in. But just like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do my part. I'm not sure, then I wasn't sure what it was, but I was just like, I'm gonna find it. And once I do, get out of my way. Because yeah.
Yeah. I have right here my quote that I was going to read, because I have been struggling with the like what's next, what's
Yeah.
next for me. Like it's on my heart. Like I was a teacher before I became a mom, and I don't know if teaching is the right place for me right now. It's a hard place. That feels really privileged to say, but like not the place I really particularly want to be right now is teaching. But so I don't know what is next for me, and but we have lots of dreams and hopes. But at the end of Falling Upward, he says, I encourage you to focus primarily on a call to being rather than a call to action. Learn how to live in a relaxed, peaceful way in this non dual world of mystery. Then eventually God will place something on your doorstep that can then move you into action. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, it's like I cried. I was like, thank you, Richard. Like, you
yeah.
needed to tell me that. Like, I just needed to hear that, because I'm ready. I'm like eager and willing to help and pray or sit with and deconstruct or make fun of religion. I don't care what people need. I'm just like, here, I'm on
Yeah.
board. Like
Yeah.
I just feel like this overwhelming love, um and like you said, it's a responsibility now. Like I do recognize
Hmm.
my privileges and my place, and I want to be able to use this for the people that I believe God has broken my heart for.
Hmm. Well, for anybody that's listening that doesn't know what book you're talking about, it's Falling Upward by Richard Rohr. Highly recommend that book. That's like a yearly read for me
Mhm.
now. Um, I feel all of that. I really do. And I'm curious, and not to kind of like turn the page to another question, but I had a thought while you were talking just now. And I'm thinking about the people that we've talked to, and the overwhelming majority of the people that we talk to are queer, LGBTQ plus, and coming out of some spaces that are like conservative and what they did. And I'm trying to think, there's only been a handful of people, maybe, that we've talked to that has kind of like has your story, that you're, like you said, you're straight, white, cis, middle class, um, and kind of coming from that Southern Baptist conservative church where your surroundings, you didn't really have to think about things, and that was my upbringing, 100%. So I resonate with that. Like I just didn't have to think about stuff, um,
Mhm.
because that's just what the world it was built for me, right? So I didn't have to
Yeah.
think about those kinds of things. And so I'm curious, at what point did um did that realization of, okay, all of these teachings that we hold as like foundational, like especially when it comes to queer inclusion, these teachings are the last line in the sand. If you go past this or wipe that line out or whatever, you're basically just um how would they phrase it? Well, it's a slippery slope, you're backsliding, you're just whatever with the world. I mean, it's any number of phrases. How did you reconcile that stuff? How did you
Mm.
personally, and you don't have to have like a
Oh
deep
gosh.
theological answer, but like for you, what was that
Yeah.
process like internally, or even were there conversations with your partner, with your spouse? I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
those things, uh, if a, it's hard to deconstruct together as a couple because nobody goes at the same
Mm.
pace, and so sometimes that happens, that friction. So what was that like? When was it the moment of like your friend kind of like, hey, I'm transgender,
Mm.
and that started the ball rolling? What did that look like for you?
I would say so meeting the people in Afghanistan kind of showed me God was bigger
Hmm.
than maybe I imagined. And then my friend who was transgender kind of put a face to a real big issue that just hadn't sat well with me. But when depression hit, um, I, gosh, we had just we were trying to foster, but then COVID hit. We were fostering, kind of a long story there, but and this wave of depression hit, and I tried everything. I mean, we spent all kinds of money on doctors, and I thought that I was having heart problems. It was all of the things, but
Hmm.
it was just like severe anxiety that turned into really bad depression. And um, I prayed a lot. Like I did all the devotions, I did all the things, and nothing was working. I was eating right and doing all the things. And one day I just felt like I cried out for the millionth time to the Lord, and I was literally crying. And I'm like, what is it? Like, what is it? What do you have for me? And I swear it was like, read my word. And I was like kind of bitter. I was like, what? I'm like doing devotions every freaking day. What are you talking about? Like, stop letting anybody else tell you. Like, read my word and ask me your questions. And so, like, I had like a few questions, and one was like, why am I going through this depression? What is it? What are you trying to show me? And then the very next question was like, what am I supposed to think about my brothers and sisters who are gay and transgender? And um, like within the first couple weeks of reading, I like had this like moment where I was like walking, and this like I can't even really exactly recall it, but it was like this like it was like a if I can't fathom what it would be like to be gay. If I can't fathom, then why would I make any decisions on their moral behalf? If
Hmm.
I can't fathom it. So all the people who are making decisions according from in the church, if they can't fathom what it's like to be gay, then how can they know how to wrestle with this? We've got to start trusting the people who have experienced this and have been seeking God. That was like kind of the first like wave. And that just sent me on a journey. And I didn't even know there was such thing as people who believed in God and were affirming. Like I didn't know, like that's
Hmm.
the crazy thing is like I didn't even know that was like happening in the world. I mean, I was like so closed off from what was happening. And then it just, as soon as I opened up that can of worms, I couldn't get enough of it. But I was also arguing with myself,
Oh yeah.
like, okay, well, what would you say about this verse? And so then I like listened to like a 3-part series from this very evangelical church, in Texas that I knew. And I listened to a 3-part series that was like anti-LGBTQ, listened to it. And it was like, I heard I could kind of get on board with one or two, but then like there would be these gut punches, and it was like God's like, you can't believe that anymore. You can't hear that and know that think that that's even possibly right, And it was like those first moments of him being like, not everything you're hearing is good. You've got to use your own discernment. And it was like I think in depression I couldn't trust my discernment. Felt like I was faking being happy so much that I couldn't like do anything but just fake being happy and then go to bed. But once God started to like let me ask questions and he started answering questions and showing me that, I mean, it was like the most healing thing in the world. And I can't imagine that not being God. It's
Hmm.
when it's healing and it's, or, whatever God is, like the spirit of God, like he was so in that. And yeah. So, and my husband's been amazing in it. So whenever I felt like God said, read the Bible, I read the chronological Bible that year. And then the next year, my husband did it with me and we just finished it, for the second time. And we just went through, and when we got to hard passages together, we kind of went through them together and talked about it. And now he's like, why do people have what is people's holdup? Like he's totally on board. Like, he just kind of trusts me along. Like I'm the one listening to the podcast and studying, and I'm like telling him every night, oh my gosh, you got to hear
Yeah.
this. And, I'm kind of like, I'm the one that's, really been convicted, but he's, just seen me heal from this like crazy wave of depression that he felt so helpless in. And he's like, I can't think that that's not good either.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's telling that so many people, coming from places like we did, that a lot of their stories center around relationship, center around lived experiences. And
mhm.
I think that's one of, you know, I don't want to disparage anybody. I won't say that it's done on purpose or it's done with like some sort of nefarious, internal whatever. But I do think that that's part of the reason that the church downplays experience so much, and kind of forces us to detach from lived experiences, because so much of what was handed to us is counter to what we experience on a day to day. You know, growing up being told, gay people or people of the world, they're all out to get us. They're all evil.
Mm.
And they're going to try to drag you away from the church. And then, I get older, I go out to college, I start meeting new people, um, get out of college and, get married, and now we're around even more people. And I'm just like, that's not like, or even in high school, it
True.
was like, these people, they don't care that I go to church or don't go to church. They don't care one way or the other. What are you talking about? And then when I've said it a million times. One of the greatest things that's ever happened to us is some of the friendships that we've had, that we've created over the last few years, working with our local Pride Center. And not a single one of them has ever come up to me and been like, Joe, if you're going to be my friend, I'm going to need you to quit the church and denounce God. That's never been a conversation.
Yeah.
There've been lots of
I
questions,
mean,
but
and like actually like quite the contrary, right? Like when I was at the Pride Parade, like, when I went down to Orlando, I was just out there by myself for the first little bit and I was just walking around and the very first person that talked to me because of the Free Mom Hug shirt was a transgender woman. And we talked for about 45 minutes and we talked about God and what we believed that were very similar and a few things that were different. We hugged and we cried and we shared. I mean, gosh, like I felt like if there is a Holy Spirit that is good and loving and kind, I felt it in that moment right there. And
right.
so if like God says that where two or more are gathered, he's there and I feel them, then they matter. They matter to him or her or whatever, whatever that spirit is. Like they matter. They matter to me. And if they matter to me, then they should matter to
Hmm.
everybody. And um, yeah, I think that we've lost touch with people. We've really like lost touch with reality, really. And it's so much easier to just do stuff on social media and to watch the news and think we know what's happening. And in Jacksonville, like I've just been like kind of sad to think like there are still pockets that like really are still segregated. It feels like, like we're just still kind of living like really, we got it. There's got to be something more to do to like integrate people and um, find our commonalities, or
Yeah.
else I don't know what's gonna happen.
Well,
Crazy.
not to get too churchy, but one of the things that we talk about all the time is, like where Jesus talks about the golden rule in Matthew 7, and then
Mm,
immediately following talking about how we treat people, he talks about the narrow road that leads to life and the wide path that leads to death. And so many, I can remember so many sermons and teachings about, follow the narrow road that's going to lead to life, lead to heaven, and that other road takes you to hell. But that's not the language that Jesus is talking about. He's talking about in
yeah.
the here and now. The narrow
Mm,
road is the golden rule. And so, like, how we treat others now, today, will either lead to life today or it will lead to destruction today. And so much of what we're seeing, not only locally, in the state of Florida, but even nationally, you're just seeing um, politicians, you're seeing leaders, you're seeing religious leaders choosing that wide path to pander to a base and to fundraise, and you're seeing destruction every day. I mean, and people's lives, and then I mean, even it affects, like economies, it affects my pocket, it affects your pocket. I mean, it just affects so much stuff. And um, yeah, if we would just learn to treat others with dignity and respect. I mean, that's like a bottom line. Like that's the low bar. Just treat a
yeah.
person as a human. That's not
Yeah.
asking for much.
Right. But yeah, I've been really like looking at that verse a lot, and thinking about that because since my shift of my mind and reading those books has really helped me. Like, of course, you walk through this world thinking about those kinds of things and you recognize how many people are focused on everything else,
Yeah.
and so I've been trying so hard to like walk like looking for like what is going to bring me a little bit closer towards peace, what's going to
Hmm.
bring me a little bit like how am I going to be able to love that person just a little bit better and how can I protect that person a little bit better. And like if you're constantly doing that, that's the like to me I feel like the
Yeah.
narrow path. It's hard because it's like never the easy thing to do. Like
Right.
it's always the harder option. And like it always requires more of you. And so like the cop out of like, oh, well, loving them is telling them that they've got to do this, this, and this. I'm like, it's just such a cop out. Yeah. And I've been really like, sad. I mean, I've had these like real emotional like moments with this process because I'm sad that I believed what I believed for so long. I'm sad that though I feel like I have like all the answers myself that I need and I feel like I can articulate them pretty well. Some like some people just still really push back and it's like I don't understand why some people just still don't seem to
Yeah.
hear it, but I just feel really excited that like some people are starting to listen a little bit better. I mean, even if it's just like a couple people here and there, like I think that I don't know, people have got to hear that what they're hearing on the news isn't always lining up with what's actually happening in the real world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say too, for those that are listening that are wanting to be an ally or an advocate or um I heard Representative Anna Eskamani, who we're going to be talking to in a few days. She likes to use the term accomplice versus ally. But whatever term you use, I think what you're saying is like so many people don't know what that first step is. How to do that, and I think some of the things that you just said are like looking for ways to love people better. And,
Mm,
whether that's attributed to God or, for somebody that's listening that, maybe not Christian, attributed to something else, whatever. But I do believe that if you're looking for opportunities, that opportunities will present themselves.
yeah.
Personally, I believe that God, if you're going to use that kind of language, is always wants healing, and
Hmm.
um all and then for our role in that is to then partner with that healing, and whatever that looks like, and whatever
Right.
capacity we have. And so it's like, okay, like you said, how do we bring healing? How can I be a part of that? And for some people, not to go off on a little tangent, but for some people, I think the first step, if you're listening and you're an ally and you haven't done this, I think one of the first steps is an apology, is to say, I'm
Mm,
sorry in whatever way you can, whether it's like, to a handful of people maybe, or um, to a group, or man, use social media. I mean, there's people watching. You'll probably get a few comments, but yeah, I love that idea of just of constantly looking and saying, okay, how do I love better? How do I make this place
yeah.
better?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you know, that I also like to say like the next right thing, just like what's the next right thing? Because in my
Mm,
anxiety and like my depression, I would have a mistake, I'd have a slip up, I'd have a panic attack or whatever. And if you want to look at it at the God and spiritual way, maybe you say like Satan, but whatever it was, the chaos in my mind would make me spiral and keep thinking about it and think about
mm.
the time it happened before that and think how I'm never going to get out of it. But like, if you pause and say, okay, that happened, and what's the next right thing? What can I do now? And usually, like you said, it's an apology, like going to my daughter, I'm sorry that I like raised my voice, or, it's just like, if you just can realize that we're all always going to make mistakes, but we all have the ability to show so much love. And like, if God is love, then the way to be like him is to love. And like, if you can lean closer towards love, then you're always leaning closer towards whatever, God, or doing the right thing, I think.
No, I
And
agree.
if your love is punitive, I don't feel like that is valid. That's, that's not, love is very graceful and gracious and um,
Yeah,
abundant,
I had that conversation with somebody the other day. They were like, well, there has to be punishment for those that, don't, say this prayer or whatever. And I'm like, why?
Mhm.
Why does there have to be that? And I'm like,
Yeah,
that doesn't sound like a God who's like unending, undying characteristic. Like the thing is love. God is love. That doesn't sound like love. You wouldn't do that to your children. And if you say that you would do that to your children, I think you're a horrible human being. Like there's just no way around it.
yeah,
I think you're a terrible person and you shouldn't have kids. Um, I, that God sounds like the middle-aged men who made that God up. That's what that sounds like to me. Um,
yeah,
not an
yeah,
actual being that's creative enough to manifest, you know, I've got a window in front of me, manifest these, trees and those wildflowers that are over there and those birds I'm seeing in the air. You know what I mean? It's just, Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you want me to read this poem? I'll read it.
Yeah, I was going
Is
to
that
ask.
okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
please do.
Yeah.
And so you wrote this to
Okay.
your friend that was in the military with you, right? That's been
Yes,
transitioning.
this was to the one that came out as transgender in that original meeting, the one that our lives have kind of been parallel. And he and I are still, good friends. He's in Texas and I'm here in Florida, so we
Right.
don't see each other very often. But he really walked through this process with me really graciously. He grew up Catholic and he was willing to answer questions with me or for me anytime I needed, and was super vulnerable. And I mean, I tried not to bombard him too much, but he was just, really, really supportive. And I've thanked him so many times for that. But when he told me that he was kind of wrapping up all of his surgeries and his last one was coming up, I tried to come up with something to do for him. And this is kind of just what came out. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
please share that.
Okay. For me, I had always felt safe. Life was easy, morals made sense, and rules were for my good. Again, for me. Broken rules meant broken people. Surrender was often achieved through conformism. But then I met you, and you were important to me. Your soul was kind, your opinions mattered, and just like anyone else in the room, I would have died for you. By knowing you and caring about you, I learned the truth about you. You weren't safe in the same places I was safe, and life wasn't easy for you. My given morals could have led to your demise, and our rules were calling you bad, evil, and sinful, but it didn't match. I didn't have answers, but I knew without a shadow of a doubt you mattered, and you didn't have to change to matter. Your struggles, your suffering, your oppression, you. You were worth asking God questions and seeking the right wisdom. You were the one God placed in my path to shake me to my core, to break my heart. You were the chisel that did all the tedious work to break down my walls. You were the tool God used to reveal who He really is, how big, inclusive, colorful, artistic, abundant, and mostly how loving. You. Privilege brings power. Power often leads to pride, pride to others, oppression. But thank God for you. You matter to me because you matter to Him. You are included in my life as you are included in His kingdom. You are worth my sacrifice because you have always been worth His life. You. I am a better me because of you. Not one day will go by where I don't thank God for you. And that's it.
That's really good. Just a lot of emotions swirling around in my head right now. Um, yeah, that's very beautiful. Um, is there a do you have a title for that?
I don't know. I kind of
Okay.
just like for now have it as
Yeah.
you. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I'm not really sure. I wrote it and then I like drew it. I sent him a voice note, but I also drew it on a paper and sent it to him framed so he could have it. But I just feel like that message, though it was for him, it really is for anybody in the LGBTQ community because I know not everybody's going to hear that, but they all are part of my journey. Each like now when I see somebody out in the community that's part of that, you can tell it's part of the
Mhm.
community. They're wearing their rainbow flags or anything. I just like want to hug them. I just want to love on them, and I'm just so grateful for that. Like that's a different. My heart has been opened, and if it wasn't for them, I would have never known that part of God and or that part of love or however you want to see it, that part of goodness
Mhm.
and humanity. And so that, you know, that is really to all my friends and to all the people out there that are paving the way, and really stepping out of their comfort zone to be who they are, they matter. They
Mhm.
all really do matter.
You know, as you were talking, that's one of the things that I have just come to really understand over the last several years. Is I had such a uh, I know, well, some people might not like this, but that's fine, whatever. I had such a Midwestern white conservative view of God because that's how I grew up.
Mm,
And deconstruction, if you know what I'm talking about, but some may not, but just um think about it like a wall. I think this is Rob Bell. I could be wrong, the author, but talking about like taking the bricks out of a wall and re-examining each brick to see if it's like a good brick
mm,
or bad one. And then if it's a good one, putting it back in place. If it's bad, tossing it and putting another one in its place. Um, and so, through deconstruction, you do that anyway, but then there is something different about the idea of queer inclusion. And
mm,
I, I don't know if I can explain it adequately, but um, I have yet to come across even like a modern take of strength and bravery and courage and a kind of love that I don't understand when I know people that I care about and I love that have for years fought uh, for a place at the table,
mm,
specifically when it comes to church, and been rejected over and over and over, and yet they still fight.
mm.
I I can't think of a better example of, love, tenacity, whatever you want to call it, but to me, that is the image of in many of my friends, I see a really complete picture of Jesus, of the of Christ, whether they realize it or not. But that's what it's been to me. Not
Yeah,
to Yeah, not to
I
overblow
felt.
it or to be like too hyperbole or whatever. But honestly, I see Jesus in this. Like you've got these people
Mm.
that are literally fighting for the right to love, and the authorities, the powers that be, the religious leaders are like, nope, not happening. And then I open the pages of the Gospels and I'm like, wait, I'm seeing this played out in real time.
I know. Do you think that those people who have such a hard time maybe letting go of what they believe and kind of investigating further, do you think that they don't believe it from themselves? Because I think that was part of my depression. Like, I feel like I didn't maybe believe that I really was worthy. And, because I did feel like if I'm innately sinful, then I am kind of always messed up. But like when God started to reveal to me, like, that I was good and that they are good and all that, I wonder if the people who can't get on board, like, don't believe all the way that they are just totally good. They're just
No, I
good, they're
I've
just
had that
good people.
conversation.
And
Yeah, I've had that conversation with so many people uh, on pushback on things that I'll say or I'll post or whatever, and it'll be like, no, we're not good. We're broken. We're sinful. And I keep telling them, no, no, no. Listen, you're not broken. You're not sinful. That is not your nature. I'm like, yeah, if you look at humanity, there is a brokenness within humanity, but it was something that was done to us. It's not us. Like, that's not my character. My character is not to create chaos or participate in chaos. I have and I do, but that is not my truest true. But no,
but if instead, if I feel like they used language like, hey, like, trust that still small voice inside of you that's pushing you towards kindness, love, and compassion, like, trust that. Like, then you're saying, like, that's actually what's inside of you is this spirit of goodness that can overflow if you just lean into it, if you just maybe know that it's there,
yeah, no,
And I
I,
feel like
I
that's what,
do.
if we believe that Jesus died on the cross it wasn't just Darius, but to send the helper, the advocate, the person who the spirit that was going to be able to live inside of us and do the good will through us, right? Like if we believe that, then we have to start believing that. I feel like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that,
Oh, yeah,
that
that's true.
is,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. If you're gonna say you believe it, then either you do or you don't, and it impacts how you live or it doesn't. So yeah, I
yeah.
totally agree. Um, so let me I'll kind of land the plane because I want to honor your time because you got little ones and stuff to do. Um, so as you're going through this and it's never ending. Where
Mm.
it's just going to be an ongoing process. But I'm curious with everything that's going on, with everything that's going on personally, and you trying to find your next steps, and I'm sure you get pushback just like we all do. Where are you finding your peace? Where are you finding your hope and your joy in the middle of all of this?
I knew you would ask this, so I've thought about it. But when because you do ask this at the end, and so I've been one thinking, and the first answer that keeps coming is like everything's giving me hope right now. Like I really am like in a good place, which is so hopeful to me because
Hmm.
I know where I was last year, and so like that's hopeful, but um like very falling upward-esque.
Hmm.
I'm so comfortable with the unknowing now. Like I have this piece, like everybody's like, well, where are you gonna, I told you beforehand, like that we're about to list our house for sale. Probably by the time this airs, it'll be listed for sale. And we're trying to move, and we want to homestead for a little while. And I have big dreams and aspirations to maybe find a way to do something with all of my passions for like eating healthy and herbal remedies and things like that. Somehow incorporating that with my passion to love on the LGBTQ
Hmm.
community. Like I don't know how, but I have lots of ideas, but but like the unknowing and still having peace about it is really hopeful for me. Like, I just feel like the things that I feel like I do know are like really good and they're enough to hold on to propel forward,
Hmm.
and with all the things that I don't know and understand. So that's probably where my biggest hope right now.
That's a great answer. That's the first time that's been the answer. So that you're the first person to say anything like that. But again, that resonates with me. I know exactly 2 years ago, I would have been like, you're crazy. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah,
But
same.
yeah, but I feel that and where unknowing and mystery at one point in time felt very chaotic, felt very um, like the world is falling apart, like it's opening up underneath me. Now it does. It feels freeing. It feels I have been released to ask any questions and dive into
Yeah.
any kind of topic and to read any kind of, you know, uh
And
I have
wouldn't like any good father do that? Like any
yeah,
good father, like wants their kids to come sit in their lap and like ask all the questions, like have a lot of doubt, get messy, go play in the woods together. Like
yeah.
isn't that what a good parent does? And I think that that's what our creator wants from us. Whatever the world is so mysterious as it is, like it's asking us to ask a million questions, you know.
I think that's a great way to end this podcast. That was a great quote. I couldn't get better. I love that. Yeah, Amanda, thank you so much for it. Number one, thank you for listening. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for the work that you're doing over there on that part of Florida and being willing to. Um, Places like Florida need people like you. Especially, listen, it is so crucial in this season, especially in this year, 2024, that straight allies get really, really loud. Um, I'll die on that hill. It is of
Mm.
the utmost importance, and so I'm just so thankful that our paths crossed and that you agreed to come on
Yeah.
here and talk about your story because I know there's going to be people listening that this is going to encourage them.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, everybody, we got to take off. Life continues on even after just such a great conversation. So Amanda, thank you again for all of it. It was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, y'all. I keep telling everybody if you've got a story that you want to share, holler and we'll figure it out. And Amanda's a great example of that. We love hearing from the people listening. So yeah, reach out. My email's in there. Oh, Amanda, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, let's say your story resonates with them and you're like, yes, or maybe somebody locally, because we have a lot of people in Florida that listen. Um, is there a way for
Yeah.
them to find you?
Yes. Well, you could, if you want to link my Facebook page, you could, and I'll also send you my email address. So you could
Okay.
link it, and yeah, I'd love to connect
Okay, yeah,
for sure.
that'll all be in the show notes. I'm glad I didn't forget that. I almost did. I'm sorry. But that'll all be in the
That's
show notes too. So go through that. If what Amanda was talking about was like, yes, I know exactly, or like, oh, that's curious about that. Hit her up. She's super friendly, super accessible, ready to talk with anybody. Yeah, don't do it alone. Reach out. All right, thanks for following along, you guys. Now get out of here. Go love on some people.